The rain fell over the green fork in steady sheets, softening the ground to black mud beneath the hooves of the horses. Summer's bold heat had already faded, leaving the air cool and ripe with the scent of the river. Robb Stark's tent stood at the heart of his camp, lamplight glowing within, a small beacon in the shifting gloom. Even at night, the banners of House Stark fluttered, gray direwolf on white, though streaked now with clinging mud and rain. Within the canvas walls, the young wolf sat alone at a plain table, hunched over a map of the twins, his hands stained with the ink of plotting. Gray wind lay at his side, golden eyes flicking to the shadows, never quite at ease. The direwolf's presence offered comfort, but not safety. Not here. Not in this tent so close to Walder Frey's walls. Robb's mind ran ceaseless, turning over every word spoken, every promise made. His mother's voice echoed, quiet and pained. Trust no Frey. But the king in the north had come to the twins with an army and a purpose, not as a beggar or a boy, but as a conqueror forced to barter passage for the future of his cause. A candle guttered as the flap opened. Catelyn Stark stepped into the light, her wet cloak pooling at her feet. Her eyes shadowed by the burdens of 100 hard leagues. He will never forget the insult, she said softly. Old Walder bears every slight like a knight wears his armor. Robb looked up. And he will not forgive. No, he will not forgive. He has waited for this day, Robb. You must know that. Robb nodded, tracing the inked river between the twins. I gave him Edmure, a Tully, as good as a Stark. I will dance his dance. I will play the dutiful son. We will cross, mother. We must. Catelyn crossed her arms, lips pressed thin. That is not all he wants. Robb gave a thin, wry smile. He wants his due, and he wants his vengeance. He would like to see me humbled, broken, if he can. But he does not wish to face my wolves in the field. Not yet. He glanced toward the canvas wall, where the sounds of the camp, steel voices, the distant bark of a dog, were muffled by the rain. We are the blade at his throat. He's the dagger at our back. Catelyn sighed, sinking onto the bench across from him. Is this how kings live, trapped by their own bargains? Robb's eyes softened. Kings live by their wits, or they do not live long. You taught me that. For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the steady drip of rain. Then Robb spoke, low and measured. How do you deal with a man who is always watching for a knife in the dark? You show him your hands, Catelyn answered, but you never show him your heart. Robb nodded, tapping the map. Tonight, I ride to the twins for the feast. We'll see what the Lord of the Crossing offers me in his halls. A shiver passed through her. Take care, Robb. Always. He rose, straightened his cloak, and placed a hand on her shoulder. I will not walk into a slaughter, mother. I know the stories. I know what men do when pride is wounded and power is at stake. He left the tent and the warmth of his mother's gaze. Gray wind padding at his heels. The rain had eased, though the night was thick and close. Robb's retinue was ready. Sir Wendell Manderly, tall as a tower and twice as broad, the great Jan Umber grumbling under his breath, and Catelyn's Uncle Brynden, the Blackfish with his cool blue stare. They moved through the camp, soldiers bowing heads, voices falling silent as the king passed. The scent of smoke and steel clung to the air. Somewhere, a horse whinnied, restless. The army would not sleep easy tonight. The procession rode slowly, splashing through the muck to the stone causeway. The towers of the twins loomed above the river, lit by torchlight. Robb's eyes flickered to the windows. Shapes moved behind the glass, shadows waiting. At the gate, Sir Hostin Frey awaited, thin and sour-faced, flanked by men in Frey livery. My lord, Hostin called, his voice oily. The bridge is yours, as promised. My father waits within, eager to break bread with his royal guest. Lead on, Sir Hostin. Robb replied, forcing a smile. "I would not keep Lord Walder waiting." They crossed into the first tower, the clang of the portcullis echoing overhead. The Frey hall smelled of roast meat, wet dogs, and river reeds, a stink that clung to the bones of the place. The banners of House Frey lined the walls, blue and gray, twin towers on silver field, their sigils catching the torchlight. Robb kept his head high, but every sense was sharpened, every instinct alert. Gray wind moved close, hackles raised. In the great hall, the Freys were assembled in force. Lord Walder himself sat atop a dais, thin lips pursed in a fox smile. He was ancient, a monument of spite and malice, with watery eyes and a voice like dry parchment. "My honored guests," Walder Frey called, spreading his arms. "Welcome, welcome. At last the king in the north dines in my hall." Robb strode forward, his retinue at his side. "Thank you, Lord Walder, for your hospitality. You honor House Stark and House Tully alike." Walder gave a snort. "Honor. Hot. Words. But sit. Sit. Eat my food, drink my wine. You've brought your direwolf, I see. Will he feast as well, or would you rather tie him up in the yard?" "Bowen." Robb met his gaze, cool and steady. "Gray wind goes where I go, my lord. He is not a hound to be chained." Walder's eyes glinted. "No, I suppose not. My halls are safe, your grace. Nothing to fear here." The feast was a spectacle, if not a comfort. The Freys filled the benches, sons, daughters, grandchildren, bastards. The hall rang with laughter, but every jest had an edge. Roasted pig, river trout, honeyed bread, and strong wine flowed, but every mouthful was a gamble, every cup a test. Robb smiled, exchanged toasts, yet drank little. Watching the room through lowered lashes, he saw Lothar Frey, sharp-eyed and nervous, and Walder Rivers, the base-born captain of the guards, speaking quietly to his brothers. Edmure sat beside Rosalind Frey, pink-cheeked and trembling, his hand shaking as he lifted his goblet. As the night deepened, the mood in the hall shifted. The laughter faded to murmurs. The music slowed, and Walder Frey rose from his seat. "A wedding is a sacred bond," he declared, his voice thin but clear. "A king's word is his life. I see my house honored tonight by your presence, Stark. We are bound now, blood to blood. Let us drink to it, eh? To peace, to family." He raised his cup, and all followed suit. Though Robb noted some hands trembled, he touched his goblet to his lips, tasting the wine but swallowing nothing. When the cup was lowered, Walder leaned forward, his mouth twisted. "The North remembers, they say. But does the North forgive?" Robb's smile was as cold as the river. "The North forgives what is just. We remember what is owed and what is given." Walder's gaze lingered, searching. "Well spoken. You are your father's son, Stark, mayhaps more wolf than man." He nodded to his kin, and the hall stirred as servants brought forth more wine, more music, more noise. Robb rose, the scraping of his chair sharp in the hush. "If I may, Lord Walder, I would speak as king and guest." All eyes turned. Robb's voice carried, calm but strong. "We have come together, House Stark and House Frey, not as enemies but as kin. My uncle, Edmure Tully, weds your daughter Rosalind, forging a bond that will outlive any slight, any wound. Let there be peace between us, and let it last." The Freys murmured, some pleased, some sullen. Walder's mouth twitched, unreadable. "Well said. So let it be." Yet beneath the words, Robb felt the currents swirling. He had seen the guarded faces, the hands on hilts, the way some servants passed notes when they thought no one watched. The hall was a stage, and he was the lead actor. But the script was not his alone. He lingered in the feast until the hour grew late. speaking little, observing much. When at last he excused himself, Grey Wind at his side, he made his way through the torchlit corridors to his assigned chamber. A small cold room in the west tower. 2 Frey guards stood at the door. "I wish to walk," Robb said. "The air is close in here." One guard nodded, stepping aside, but the other lingered, uncertain. Robb led Grey Wind down the stair and out to the yard, the direwolf sniffing the stones. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy. Brynden Tully emerged from the shadows, silent as a ghost. "You were right to be cautious," he whispered. "Too many swords in the hall, too many eyes on our backs. The Freys are planning something, Robb." Robb nodded, voice low. "I saw the signal. Lothar's men at the doors. Walder Rivers, with the crossbowmen, above the gallery. We must be ready." "Dandero." Bryndon's face was grave. "The Great John stands with your men. Wendell Manderly too. If anything happens, Robb said. "I want you to get my mother and Edmure out. Grey Wind will stay at my side. We do not move unless I give the word." The Blackfish's mouth twitched. "You play a dangerous game." Robb smiled, thin and fierce. "Danger is all we have left." He returned to the hall as the last of the wedding revels wound down. Edmure was drunk, Rosalind quiet and pale. Walder Frey's eyes followed Robb, hooded and bright. "My lord," Robb said, "the night grows late. I would take my rest." Walder nodded. "Slow as winter." "Of course. My halls are yours." Robb bowed, retiring once more to his chamber, where Grey Wind lay at the door, lips curled. The dire wolf's unease was a blade at Robb's heart. He slept lightly, one hand on his sword, his mind running through every plan, every possibility. The night wore on. In the camp beyond the walls, Stark soldiers kept watch, their numbers swelled by men Robb had quietly summoned from the fords and the causeway. In the halls, his sworn swords feigned drunkenness but slept in mail, daggers close to hand. No door was left unbarred, no corridor unguarded. The king in the north had not come blind to the twins. Before dawn there was movement, a soft scuffle in the corridor, a whisper behind the door. Robb was awake, blade drawn, Grey Wind poised to strike. The guards outside shifted, then fell silent. Robb tensed. The door creaked open. A girl slipped through, face pale, eyes wide with fear. "My lord, the Lord Walder's men. There are crossbowmen in the upper hall. They mean to..." Her voice broke, terror shining in her eyes. Robb nodded once. "Thank you." He pressed a coin into her hand. "Go. Find my mother. Tell her to flee to the yard." Grey Wind bounded ahead, his growl echoing down the stone corridors. Robb followed, every step measured, every breath counted. He moved swiftly through the warren of passages, meeting Wendell Manderly in the main hall. The great knight already armed and grim. "My king," Wendell breathed. "The Great John waits in the yard. The Blackfish has your mother. The Freys..." A scream split the air. Steel clashed above, the gallery alive with shadows. Robb saw Lothar Frey at the top of the stairs, blade drawn, barking orders. Men poured from side doors, crossbows raised. Robb's sword flashed. "Stark, to me," he roared, the voice of winter itself. Grey Wind leapt at a Frey swordsman, jaws crushing bone. Wendell Manderly swung his great sword, carving a path. From the yard, the shouts of the Great John's men rang out, their northern voices cutting through the chaos. The hall became a storm of violence, Freys against wolves, banners falling, blood pooling on the stone. But Robb had planned for this, had seen the signs. At his signal, the Blackfish's archers emerged from hidden alcoves, loosing arrows into the Frey guards on the gallery. From the yard, Stark men poured through the gates, swords bared, the direwolf banners rising in the torchlight. Robb fought at the heart of it, steel meeting steel, Grey Wind at his side. He saw Lothar fall, an arrow through the throat. Walder Rivers cut down by the Great John's axe. The Frey guards breaking, some fleeing, some dying where they stood. The chaos was short, brutal. When it ended, the hall was red with blood. But the direwolf still stood. Robb wiped his blade, chest heaving, eyes hard. Walder Frey cowered on his dais, face ashen. "Mercy," he croaked. "I am your host." Robb strode forward, wiping the blood from his brow. "You broke guest right, old man. The laws of gods and men. For this, there is no mercy." He turned to his mother, who stood beside the blackfish, pale but unbowed. "Mother, Edmure. Are you well?" Caitlin nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "We are safe. You saved us." Robb looked down at Walder Frey, who trembled, lips working soundlessly. "Your line will pay for this, Walder Frey, but your daughter Roslyn will be spared, as will any not complicit in this treachery. The rest will answer for the red betrayal." He raised his sword, the hall silent, but for the moans of the dying. The banners of the wolf hung bloodied, but unbroken. Outside, the first rays of dawn broke over the river, painting the stone of the twins with gold. The king in the north stood victorious, not through blind faith, but through the hard coin of caution and cunning. The wedding that was meant to end House Stark had become its triumph. The war was not over. But Robb Stark had outplayed the Freys, and the Game of Thrones had a new master. He sheathed his sword, turning to his men. "See to the wounded. Bury the dead, both friend and foe. We march at sunrise." The banners of the direwolf unfurled in the morning wind, and Robb Stark, king in the north, strode forth from the ruin of the Red Wedding, the future of his house secured, for now at least, by wit, steel, and the wolf at his side. A hush fell over the twins, the dawn's uncertain light glimmering on pools of blood and the battered remains of banners and bodies. The night's violence had left the stone corridors echoing with the groans of wounded men, both Stark and Frey. Smoke from overturned braziers drifted up to the rafters, mingling with the smell of spilled wine and iron. Robb Stark strode through the ruined hall, his boots sticky, his every movement watched by Northmen and Freys alike. Some stunned, some grateful, others only silent with fear. The last of the Frey resistance collapsed with the rising sun. Robb's men, grim and bloodied, rounded up the survivors, dragging those who'd dropped their arms into the muddy yard. The old banners of the twins were torn down, trampled beneath the direwolf's feet. Gray wind paced the length of the hall, hackles still raised, yellow eyes never leaving the dais where Walder Frey huddled among his less ambitious sons and trembling daughters. Robb paused near the entry, drawing in the air, heavy with the night's ruin. Wendell Manderly leaned on his sword beside him, his paunch heaving as he wiped blood from his brow. "You were right, Your Grace. They meant to kill us all." Robb's mouth was tight. "We are Starks of Winterfell. I will not be led to slaughter like sheep." His eyes swept the room, seeking his mother. She was with Edmure, who slumped in a chair with Roslyn's small hand clutching his. The girl, pale and weeping, glanced at Robb, fear and gratitude warring on her face. The blackfish emerged from the yard, helm under his arm, his grizzled face streaked with rain and blood. "The outer gates are ours. The Greatjon holds the bridge. The rest of your army waits outside. We control the twins, Robb." Robb nodded, relief a small flame inside his chest. "Good. Any Freys left fighting?" "Some few, in the East Tower. Hostine and Walder Rivers tried to rally them, but they ran when our archers fired from the yard. Most are children or old men now." The blackfish's eyes flicked to Walder Frey. "And him." Robb walked the length of the ruined hall, every eye following, until he stood at the base of the dais. Walder Frey, hunched and shaking, looked older than ever, less a lord, more a relic, his jowls sagging and mouth trembling. "Your Grace," he croaked. "You have your vengeance. Let it end here." "My vengeance." Robb's voice was cold, steady as winter. "You invited me to your hall and set crossbows above my head. You would have butchered my mother and my kin. You would have spilled the blood of my house for pride." He glanced at Roslyn, trembling at her father's side. "Were you complicit in this, girl?" Roslyn shook her head fiercely, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, my lord. Never, I swear it. I tried to warn Lady Stark. I did what I could." "Now end." "Good." Robb said softer. You are Edmure's wife now. You have my protection. He looked to the guardsmen, rough northerners with axes and scars. Take Lord Walder to the cells. He will face judgment, by my hand or by the gods. Walder's lips quivered, but he said nothing as the guard seized his arms and dragged him from the dais. The last echoes of his passing faded into the long silence that followed. Catelyn approached, her face carved from sorrow and resolve. You showed them mercy, she whispered. No, Robb replied. Only justice. The others will see. The North does not forget, but we do not slay children, nor kill for sport. She gripped his hand, squeezing it with cold fingers. Your father would be proud. He looked at her, the steel in his eyes warming for an instant. He taught me all I know. The rest I learned from the Freys. Now, Esti. He moved to the head table, standing tall. Brynden, Greatjon, Wendell. Summon the surviving Freys. The lords, the women, all who remain. I would address them. His bannermen departed to carry out his command. Robb looked to the yard, where his men assembled in ranks, many wounded, most weary. Outside, the rain had ceased, the clouds thinning to mist. For a moment, Robb allowed himself a breath, steady and slow, letting the night's terrors ebb. Not long after, the hall filled again, this time with survivors. Freys in rumpled gowns, in blood-stained mail, with faces blotched by tears and terror, shuffled to stand before the Stark King. Rosalind kept close to Edmure, and several children clung to their mother's skirts, wide-eyed. Robb surveyed them, a lord in judgment. You all know what was planned here tonight. I do not seek vengeance on the innocent, nor on children. Those who laid down arms will be spared, provided they swear fealty to House Stark and give no further aid to my enemies. Nander. A low murmur rose from the crowd. Fearful, relieved, resentful. Ser Stevron Frey, old and hobbled, nodded shakily. We are your men, your grace. The twins are yours. Not mine, Robb replied, his voice clear. But you will hold the crossing in the name of the North. Any Frey who wishes to depart for the night's watch may do so. The rest will serve or be banished. There will be a reckoning, but not a slaughter. If you break faith again, there will be no mercy. Do you all understand? Do you all understand? The Freys muttered assent, some nodding, some hanging their heads. Robb turned to the Blackfish. Secure the towers. Send word to Riverrun. Tell my uncle Brynden that the twins are ours, and Lord Frey is in chains. Edmure, you will remain here with your wife, until we are certain of your safety. Greatjon, see to the wounded. Wendell, prepare the men to march when the time comes. Damen? He paused, voice low. We cannot linger. Roose Bolton is still in the field, and Lannister Gold buys many knives. The lords bowed, departing to carry out their orders. Robb remained, surveying the battered hall, the lingering Freys, the silent dead. He wondered if this was victory, or simply survival. As the sun rose higher, the work of the aftermath began. Stark and Tully men scoured the towers, rooting out hidden Freys and gathering the wounded. The Greatjon limped through the halls, his booming voice cracking jokes to keep his men from brooding. Wendell Manderley organized the kitchens, feeding those too weak to stand. Catelyn oversaw the care of the wounded, moving from bed to bed with a mother's patience and a wolf's resolve. Robb climbed to the battlements, gray wind at his side. He looked down at the river, the muddy banks strewn with fallen banners. Across the Green Fork, his army made camp, tents springing up like mushrooms after rain. He could see the banners of House Reed, the Crannogmen standing watch at the ford, the silver trout of Tully, proud despite the night's horror. And everywhere, the dire wolf of Stark. He leaned on the stone, mind racing. The North was watching him, as were his men and his enemies. His choices would echo beyond the walls of the twins. The Blackfish joined him, silent for a long moment. You did well, he said, voice rough. If you died tonight, the war was lost. Now you have the twins. The Freys will not cross you again. Robb smiled without humor. They will remember. But what of Bolton? What of the Lannisters? Brynden grunted. We have a bridge and a king. That's more than we had last night. Robb nodded, watching the sunlight shimmer on the water. We must march soon. The Riverlands need us. They stood in silence, two wolves atop the world, surveying the price of survival. When Robb descended, he found Catelyn waiting in the council chamber, maps and letters spread before her. The ravens fly already, she said, carrying news to the Vale, to White Harbor, to the Aryan Riverrun. The word will spread. Robb Stark outwitted the Freys. He sat across from her, fatigue etched into his features. A hollow victory if the North is lost. She reached across the table, touching his hand. The North is not lost. You are not your father, Robb, but you are his son. He squeezed her hand. We will go home, Mother. When this is done, we will go home. Man, now. The day wore on. In the halls, the Freys and Starks coexisted in a wary truce, each side wary of the other's steel. Robb's captains gathered for council that afternoon, the mood tense but determined. Wendell Manderly spoke first. With the twins ours, we have safe passage into the west. The Freys may be cowed, but the Boltons are still out there. Roose will not forgive us for spoiling his plans, if he meant to betray us. He did, growled the Great John. You saw his face at the feast, Robb. He knew what was coming, or guessed enough to keep his blade sharp. Catelyn frowned. We must watch him. Bolton is dangerous, and the Lannisters will not forgive us for surviving. Robb nodded, eyes narrowed. We march south, but not blindly. The North is not secure. We must send riders to White Harbor, to Deepwood Moat. If Roose moves against us, we will know. Man? No. The council made their plans, careful, deliberate. Robb listened to each voice, weighing every suggestion. He knew he could not afford mistakes now. The fate of the North balanced on the edge of every word. At dusk, a lone rider arrived from the south. A Reed scout, mud-spattered and breathless. He was brought before Robb in the yard, where the king stood among his men. My lord, the rider gasped, Bolton's banners have been seen near Harrenhal. They march north, fast and in force. Robb's jaw clenched. How many? 2,000 at least, with mounted knights and men-at-arms. The bastard of Bolton rides with them. A mutter rose among the Starks. Catelyn's eyes filled with dread, but Robb's gaze sharpened. We hold the twins, he said loud enough for all to hear. If Roose means to break us, let him come. The Freys will bar the crossing behind us. My uncle will hold the ford. We march at first light. Send word to the Crannogmen. Tell them to harry the Bolton host. Delay them however they can. The North is not lost. N.T. That night, the camp was a hive of preparation. Armor was mended, wounds were bound, horses fed and watered. The river rang with the clamor of men readying for war. Robb walked among them, exchanging quiet words, lending his presence to the smallest task. He spoke with the Blackfish about the disposition of the men, with Wendell about the wounded, with Edmure about the safety of Roslyn. He found Catelyn in a quiet corner, seated on a barrel, her face streaked with tears and rain. He sat beside her, the night pressing in close. Did I do right? He asked quietly. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You did what you had to do. The gods judge us by the choices we make in darkness. Mentor. He nodded, holding her hand. When this is over, I will take you home. I promise. A faint smile touched her lips. You sound like your father. He squeezed her hand. Then I hope I do him proud. At midnight, he found gray wind prowling the battlements. The direwolf was restless, haunted by the scent of old blood and treachery. Robb knelt, burying his fingers in the wolf's thick fur. We live, he whispered, because we saw the trap, because we listened. Gray wind licked his face, a soft rumble in his throat. Robb rose, walking the length of the walls, staring south toward Harrenhal. Somewhere beyond the river, Roose Bolton's banners moved in the darkness, and the war was not yet done. But for tonight, the dire wolf howled over the twins, his voice a promise to all the north. The Starks had survived, and winter was not yet done with Westeros. Dawn broke with a soft blush over the river. The Starks broke camp in ordered ranks, their banners bright against the dull sky. The Freys, subdued and cowed, watched from the walls as the northern host filed out across the bridge. Horses, stamping, shields gleaming. Robb rode at their head, gray wind beside him, his every movement watched by thousands. He looked once over his shoulder at the battered towers, the broken banners. Then he looked forward, toward the war yet to come. The North was not yet free. The Red Wedding had failed, but its poison lingered in the blood of the land. Allies must be secured, enemies watched. The Game of Thrones had not ended in the halls of the twins. It had only entered a new and deadlier phase. Yet as the northern host vanished into the morning mists, those who witnessed the march could not help but whisper. The young wolf had outwitted the old fox, and the dire wolf banner flew yet over Westeros. In the high tower of the twins, Rosalind wept into her hands. Mourning brothers lost, a father broken, a future uncertain. Edmure sat beside her, offering awkward comfort. Outside, the Blackfish marshaled the garrison, securing the bridge for the king's return. Within, Catelyn Stark stood at a window, watching her son ride away. She crossed herself, murmuring prayers to the old gods and the new, for justice, for mercy, for the hope of peace. Below, the dungeons echoed with Walder Frey's bitter curses, his feeble threats, his voice lost in the depths of stone and shadow. The twins had changed hands, and the old lord's time had run out. The road south beckoned, uncertain and treacherous. But Robb Stark rode with his banners high, his sword ready, his mother's counsel in his heart. The Red Wedding was over. The North remembered. The game was not done, and the direwolf still hunted. The tale of the young wolf was not yet finished. Not while the sun rose over the twins. Not while the North yet breathed. Not while the blood of House Stark flowed through the veins of its king. Okay. The Northmen rode beneath a sullen sky, mist rising from the green fork and wreathing the riverbanks in shifting veils of white. Robb Stark's column moved with silent discipline, 2,000 strong. Banners furled, shields sheathed, the taste of blood and betrayal still bitter on their tongues. The road south from the twins was a muddy scar across half-drowned meadows and tangled woods, the air sharp with the promise of coming frost. Robb rode at their head, a king with dawn-bright eyes and a heart hardened by the night's violence. Gray wind loped at his side, muscles bunching and stretching beneath his shaggy pelt, tongue lolling, senses alert to every shadow. The dire wolf's presence was a comfort to Robb and a warning to all who watched from the tangled trees. Behind them, the Freys towers loomed, now occupied by Blackfish and Tully banners. The river crossing held fast for House Stark. The last of the would-be betrayers hunted or fled. The North remembered. The North marched south with the morning. The great John reined his destrier closer to Robb, his beard flecked with dew, armor battered but bright. "We have the crossing, your grace, but Roose will come. He'll not forgive the spoiling of his plot." Robb nodded, eyes on the road. He must try his luck then. If Bolton seeks battle, he'll find it on ground of our choosing. "Let him so. Lannisters too, no doubt," muttered Wendell Manderly, riding behind, a fresh bandage about his arm. "Their gold breeds more enemies than the plague." "We have allies yet," Robb said, voice steady. "The Blackfish holds the twins. The Crannogmen watch the swamps. White Harbor's ships ride the White Knife. We are not alone, though our friends grow fewer by the month." The woods thickened to the west, reeds and birches bending over slow black water. The sounds of the march carried, clank of harness, low voices, the occasional whicker of a startled horse. Catelyn rode with the rear guard, wrapped in furs, her eyes drawn and sleepless, her mind never far from Winterfell or the news of her girls. Edmure and Rosalind traveled under guard, a wagon set aside for the wounded and for Lord Tully's new bride. The girl seldom spoke, her eyes haunted, her hands twisting at her skirts. The day wore on, the road winding, fields giving way to stony hills and bracken. Scouts rode ahead and behind, eyes keen for sign of Bolton banners, for gold-cloaked Lannister outriders, for any hint that the war was not finished with them yet. At noon, the host paused beside a broken sept, its stones tumbled and overgrown. The bones of some forgotten village scattered beneath the trees. The men ate in silence, passing hard bread and salted beef, the memory of the Frey treachery an open wound. Robb knelt by the stream, washing his hands and face, letting the cold water chase the sleep from his bones. Grey Wind drank beside him, snout stained with mud. The king's reflection stared up from the stream, tired, gaunt, older than his years, the weight of his father's crown pressing unseen on his brow. Brynden Tully joined him, silent, watchful. "You carry it well," he said at last. Robb shook water from his fingers. "Do I?" "Sometimes I wonder if the crown isn't dragging me beneath the river." The Blackfish crouched beside him. "You are not your father, but you are your father's son. Lord Eddard would have walked this path if it led to justice, or to Winterfell." Robb's mouth twisted. "If I survive this war, I mean to see Winterfell again. The Boltons will pay for what they did. And the Lannisters? They are the heart of the rot. Tywin still sits at court, crowing. Joffrey wears a crown he did not earn. I mean to take it from him." The Blackfish nodded, the lines of his face hard as river rock. "And what then?" "Then I go home," Robb said quietly. "If there is any home left to go to." They stood, returning to the host as the men mounted up. The road called, and the banners of the wolf unfurled once more, wind snapping at the cloth. The march resumed, south and west, through woodland and wild, toward a crossroads where fate and steel would test the mettle of the North once again. That night they made camp in a clearing ringed by ashen pine. The air was cold and brittle, stars pricking the velvet sky. Cookfires burned low. Men hunched close for warmth and camaraderie, their songs hushed and haunted. Robb summoned his council, a circle of old faces and new trusted knights and wary bannermen. Catelyn arrived last, her presence a balm and a spur. She wore no jewels, only the dire wolf clasp at her throat, her hair threaded with silver. Robb gestured to the fire. "We are hunted. Roose Bolton rides behind us with a strong host, and the Lannisters may wait ahead. We must move quickly, strike where we are not expected." "Da." Wendell Manderly nodded, wincing as he shifted his arm. "The wounded slow us, but they're Northmen. They'll march." The great Joan's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Let Roose come. We'll show him northern steel." Brynden Tully was less sanguine. "Roose is cunning. If he means to break us, he'll not do it in open battle. He'll bleed us, strike from the dark." Robb nodded. "Then we must be the darkness. We leave the road at first light. We cross the marshes, hard going, but the Boltons won't expect it. The Crannog men will guide us. We slip past Roose, harry his supply lines, force him to chase shadows." Catelyn's lips thinned, but she said nothing. She trusted her son's instincts, even when they led him into bog and bramble. The council broke up, each lord seeing to his men, his gear, his hopes and fears. Robb lingered by the fire, lost in thought. Grey Wind pressed close, a shadow among shadows. He felt Catelyn's hand on his shoulder. "You saved us all at the Twins. I did what I had to." She smiled, fierce and proud. "That is the North's way." He stared into the flames. "When this is over, will there be anything left to save?" She squeezed his hand. "There is always something left. So long as we do not surrender." The fire crackled, sparks rising to the stars. Before dawn, the camp woke, grim and silent. The wounded were mounted on litters, the host stripped for speed. The banners of the wolf were stowed, the men sworn to silence as they moved into the wild. At the edge of the marsh, a figure waited, a Crannog man in gray and green frog spear slung over his shoulder. "My lord," he whispered, bowing low. "Mira sends greetings from Greywater. The bog awaits you." Mendem summed. Robb gripped the man's arm. How far to the water? An hour's ride, then we vanish. The Boltons will find only empty camps and false trails. Good. Lead on. The army plunged into the marsh, horses picking their way through reeds and sucking mud. Men swaddled in cloaks, breath smoking in the chill air. The crannogmen melted ahead, voices soft, gestures sure. By noon, the northern host had vanished, swallowed by the maze of pools and islets, the sound of their passage muffled by water and fog. Behind them, Roose Bolton's outriders found only the ashes of last night's camp, the tracks already drowned in mud. The bastard of Bolton cursed and drove his men harder, but the crannogmen watched from the reeds, unseen, guiding the Stark king deeper into the marsh. Days passed in the wild, the host moving by night, sleeping by day, the men learning to trust the whisper of the wind, the trickle of hidden streams. The food ran low, but the crannogmen shared fish and roots, and the Northmen grumbled but endured. Robb moved among his men, quiet encouragement on his lips, his eyes always searching the mist for danger or hope. At last, they emerged on the far side of the swamp, the land rising to broken moor and lonely watchtower. From the heights, they saw the Bolton host, banners flying, lost and frustrated among the reeds. The crannogmen harried them with darts and arrows, drawing them deeper into the bog. Robb called his council to the ruined tower, the wind snapping at his cloak. "We strike at dawn," he said. "The Boltons are mired. Their flanks are open. We hit their camp, take their supplies, then vanish again. If Roose wants a war, he'll have it on northern ground." "Then no." The lords nodded, hungry for battle. Their spirits rekindled. The plan was set. The Great John would lead the charge, Wendell the reserves. The Blackfish and his Tully men would harry the rear. The crannogmen would guide them in and out, ghosts in the mist. That night, Robb slept little, sword at hand, gray wind restless beside him. He dreamed of Winterfell, of Bran and Rickon, of snow falling on silent towers. He woke before dawn, the cold biting, his men already in motion. The attack fell on the Bolton camp like a thunderclap. Northmen screamed their war cries, axes rising and falling. The Boltons, caught in the muck, struggled to form lines, their horses floundering. The crannogmen struck from the reeds, frog spears flashing, knives finding gaps in armor. The Blackfish's archers loosed from the tower, their arrows deadly in the fog. Robb led from the front, gray wind at his side, the direwolf tearing into the enemy. The bastard of Bolton rallied his men, but the Northmen pressed hard, cutting down banners, burning supply wagons. The Boltons broke, some fleeing into the swamp, others cut down where they stood. Roose himself was nowhere to be found, vanished into the mist, his fate unknown. The victors gathered in the ruins, wounded tended, prisoners bound. Robb looked over the field, heart pounding, the taste of battle in his mouth. The price had been paid in blood, but the Bolton threat was broken. Their army scattered, their name cursed in every campfire tale. Catelyn found him by the stream, hands still shaking. She pressed her forehead to his, tears on her cheeks. "You did it. The North is safe for now." "Ben?" Robb closed his eyes, feeling the weight lift, if only for a heartbeat. "For now." He summoned his lords, his captains, his friends. "We march for Riverrun. The Lannisters will hear of this defeat. Let them know the North is not broken." The banners unfurled again, the direwolf gleaming. The host moved west, picking up the broken, the weary, the hopeful. Word spread ahead of them. Robb Stark had survived the Freys and smashed the Boltons in the marsh. The young wolf had outwitted every snare. In the days that followed, ravens flew from the camps. Letters went north and west, to White Harbor, to Deep Wood, to Bear Island. Robb wrote to Sansa at King's Landing, to Arya, if she yet lived, to the wildlings at the wall and the old bannermen of his house. He wrote as a king, but also as a son, a brother, a wolf of Winterfell. Riverrun loomed ahead, a fortress above the tumbling river, banners flying from its towers. Edmure and Roslin entered first, the lord greeted by his uncle, his bride received with cautious joy. The castle's halls rang with new life. The Tullys welcoming their kin. The Northmen feasting. The wounds of the past week soothed by wine, and the hope of peace. Robb stood on the battlements, watching the river flow, the sunset painting the water gold. Catelyn joined him, silent as the dusk. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "We survived. That is enough." She took his hand, staring down at the waters that had witnessed so much sorrow and hope. "It is not over. The Lannisters will strike again." He nodded. "Let them come. We are wolves, Mother. We endure." The night fell soft and deep. In the dark, a king slept at Riverrun, the direwolf at his door, his sword beside his bed. The Game of Thrones moved on, wheels within wheels. But for a little while, House Stark endured, the banners unbroken, the north a whisper of vengeance on every southern wind. Ka. A hush of anticipation settled over Riverrun as word of Robb Stark's triumphs spread through the riverlands. In the shadow of the ancient castle, autumn deepened, crisp and golden, the riverbanks ablaze with falling leaves. Farmers left offerings at the gate, and small folk gathered in huddled knots, whispering tales of the young wolf who had not only bested the Freys, but scattered the Boltons in the mist and mud. The air was sharp with hope and dread alike, as the lords of the river, north and mountain, made their way to the Tully stronghold to answer the king's summons. Within the walls, Robb Stark walked the length of the Godswood, each step slow, measured. Fallen leaves clung to his boots, and gray wind nosed the air, attentive and restless. The great heart tree watched, its face silent, crimson sap weeping from ancient eyes. Robb paused before the trunk, laying a calloused hand on the rough bark, head bowed in prayer. He asked not for victory, nor vengeance, but for wisdom, to see the right path among the many that wound through blood and sorrow. The leaves whispered in the wind, and for a moment Robb remembered childhood hunts in the Wolfswood, the distant laughter of Bran and Rickon, the gentle voice of his father beneath the snow-heavy boughs of Winterfell. Footsteps sounded on the moss behind him. Catelyn, her face pale in the green light, hair streaked with silver. She moved quietly, a mother at the edge of her son's burden. "Ravens have come," she said, voice low. "From White Harbor, from the Eyrie, even from the Wall." He turned, eyes bright, shoulders squared with the weight he now carried. "News, word of your victories, praise, hope, and warning." She handed him a letter, the wax broken, the seal of Manderley blue and white. He opened it, reading swiftly. Lord Wyman Manderley spoke of Lannister gold spreading through the south, of plots in King's Landing, and whispers that Stannis Baratheon mustered strength at Dragonstone. "The lions will strike," Catelyn murmured. "They will not forgive the shaming of the Freys and the scattering of Bolton's host." Robb nodded. "We will not wait for them to choose the field. The North must not be hunted like a stag. We will hunt." Catelyn's gaze was sharp. "Your men are weary, your supplies stretched. Winter is coming, Robb. Every lord in the south remembers Harrenhal and the Black Years." "Memasimo." "I know." He looked away, the words hard and heavy. "But every day we wait is another for the Lannisters to bring fresh swords to bear. If we can strike before they gather." "Strike where?" she pressed. Robb did not answer at once. Gray wind sniffed the air, hackles lifting as a squirrel scattered through the leaves. Robb's mind ran north and south, counting banners and remembering every map he'd ever studied by firelight. "We go west," he said at last. "We will take the fight to the Lannister heartlands. If we can threaten their lands, their gold, their kin, we can force them to choose between their pride and their power. And if they choose both..." Robb smiled, a cold, wolfish smile. "Then we show them what it means to face the North in open war." He looked to the heart tree once more, letting his hand linger on the bark. "I will not let them take the fight to Winterfell. I will carry the wolf to their gates." By noon, Riverrun's halls thrummed with new energy. Lords assembled in the great hall, banners of trout and direwolf, Barren reed, sunburst and broken lance hung side by side. The murmurs of fealty and vengeance rose with the smoke from the hearth. Brynden Tully presided at Robb's right, face impassive, while the great Joan's laughter boomed at the left. The king stood tall in boiled leather and chain, his crown plain and northern, sword at his hip. The scars on his hand were new, from the last battle, but he bore them without complaint. When he spoke, the hall hushed. The Lannisters gather at Harrenhal and in the Golden Tooth. Robb said, voice steady as stone. They think to trap us here, to wait until our supplies run dry and winter breaks us. I will not give them that luxury. The north will march before the snows come. We strike west through the Red Fork, burning every store, every armory, every gold train bound for King's Landing. We will show the South that the wolf's bite still draws blood. We will show the South that the A murmur of approval, tinged with fear, swept the gathered lords. The Riverlanders remembered Lannister torches. The Northmen remembered the burning of Winterfell. The Freys are broken but not crushed, Robb continued. We leave a garrison at the Twins, loyal men under the Blackfish's command. Any Frey who breaks faith again will be treated as a traitor. The Riverlands are ours for now, but do not mistake this for peace. Men now. Sir Rendell Manderley leaned forward, voice deep and cautious. What of White Harbor, your grace? My father asks for a strong force to keep the coast clear of Ironborn. We cannot weaken ourselves, Robb answered. But I will send riders to the Rills, to Bear Island, to every port in the north. Let the Ironborn come ashore if they dare. We will answer every threat, but our eyes must remain on the Lannisters. They are the greater danger. The council broke, each lord departing to ready his men. Robb met Brynden in the quiet of a side passage, the Blackfish's eyes sharp as river ice. This is bold, Robb. Bold and dangerous. You're gambling everything. Robb smiled, the weight of the wolf settling over his shoulders. We have no choice. If we wait, they will pick us apart, one by one. But if we strike, fast and hard, we force them to react. Every day they fear for their gold and their lands is a day they are not laying siege to Winterfell. Nendento. Brynden's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Your father would have admired your courage. Would he? Robb's eyes glinted. He'd tell me to trust my bannermen and trust my blood. I will, uncle. I will. The old knight nodded, fading into the shadows as Robb made for the yard. There, beneath banners caught by the wind, he found his men gathering, Northmen in mail and fur, Riverlanders in homespun, the great John already bawling orders at his men, Catelyn conferring with Maester Vyman over letters to send. Rosalind Frey stood apart by a fountain. Her hands knotted together. She looked up as Robb approached, her eyes rimmed with red but clear. My lord, she whispered. Is it true? Will we ride so soon? Robb nodded. You are safe here, Rosalind. You are Edmure's lady now, and the Blackfish will see no harm comes to you. When the war is done, her voice trembled. Will it ever be done? Robb looked away, the weight of prophecy heavy in his silence. One day, perhaps, when the last Lannister has laid down arms and the North is free. She bit her lip, nodding, and Robb moved on, feeling the eyes of 100 men follow his passage through the yard. Gray wind ranged ahead, a shadow beneath the walls, scattering geese and small folk alike. The direwolf's presence was both a blessing and a warning. No one dared approach Robb too closely, not now, not after the stories that had already spread. He found his mother at the stables, readying her palfrey, her jaw set with stubborn determination. You'll ride with us? He asked. I will not be left behind again, she replied, and there was no arguing. Besides, I have letters to deliver, oaths to renew. The lords of the Vale grow restless, and Lord Baelish sniffs for opportunity. He thinks the North distracted. Let him, Robb replied. We will give him nothing but steel and silence. As the day faded, the host assembled in the outer bailey, 4,000 strong, with pikes and bows, axes and blades. Riverrun's drawbridge clattered down, and Robb rode out beneath banners of wolf and trout, Grey Wind a ghost beside him. They moved west, crossing the Red Fork at the shallow fords, the air sharp with autumn's edge. Villages watched them pass, children running beside the road, old men offering hard bread and cheese, women clutching babes to their breasts as the host marched past. The news of the wolf's survival had spread, so too the fear of what it meant for the Lannisters. At night, campfires dotted the fields, constellations of hope in the darkness. Robb walked among his men, listening to stories of home, sharing quiet words with wounded and hale alike. He spoke with the great John, who clapped him on the back and called him Wolf King, and with the crannogmen who slipped like shadows between the tents, bringing word of enemy movements. In the flickering firelight, Robb felt again the nearness of his father. Dard's silent strength, his patience, his unyielding sense of right. He thought often of Sansa and Arya, of the fate that might have claimed them in the south. Catelyn found him one evening, seated alone with his maps, the candles guttering low. "Rest, Robb," she murmured. "You cannot fight every battle in your mind." "I cannot rest," he replied, tracing lines on parchment. "Every night the Lannisters gain strength. Every night I am haunted by those I could not save." "See." Catelyn knelt beside him, gathering his hand in hers. "You are not alone. You have the North, and you have your mother." He smiled, weary but grateful, and together they watched the flames die down. By the end of the week, Robb's host neared the borders of the Westerlands. Scouts rode ahead, returning with news of burned villages, broken men, and Lannister patrols massing along the Gold Road. The land was rich but wounded, the scars of war running deep. Robb called his captains to council beneath a stand of old oaks. The map was spread on a tree stump, pins marking Lannister strongholds, gold trains, and the movements of enemy hosts. "We strike at the Gold Road," Robb said, voice hard. "We burn every wagon, scatter every patrol. The Lannisters must bleed, if not in men, then in coin." The great John grinned. "A wolf's raid, eh? I like it." "Now?" Brynden Tully's voice was colder. "Tywin Lannister will not suffer this lightly. He will send all his strength against you." Robb looked up, his eyes alight with the fire of his father's line. "Let him. We do not stand and die. We strike and vanish, hit and run. The North will not be broken by pride or gold." The plan set. The men moved quickly. That night, Northmen and Riverlords slipped through the dark, striking at Lannister supply lines, burning wagons, scattering gold through muddy ditches. The Lannisters fought back, steel flashing in the moonlight, but the wolf and trout moved like smoke, here one moment, gone the next. Every dawn brought a new tale. A Lannister train smashed, a goldsmith's caravan seized, a captain captured and ransomed. Panic rippled through the enemy's ranks. Tywin's fury was swift. 1,000 men rode from Casterly Rock, banners bright, vengeance burning in their eyes. Robb refused to be trapped. He moved his host by night, never camping twice in the same place, always watching for sign of the enemy's approach. The Blackfish led sorties against scouts and outriders, while the crannogmen watched the hills and woods for ambushes. Catelyn worked her own magic, visiting every campfire, speaking with lords and knights, soothing wounded pride and brokering peace between quarreling banners. Her presence was a reminder of home, of Winterfell, of all that had been lost, and all that might yet be saved. The weeks turned, autumn deepening, the threat of snow growing nearer. The Lannisters pressed hard, sending more men into the hills, more gold to buy betrayal. In every village whispers grew. The young wolf was no longer just a king, but a legend, a shadow in the night, a warning to the proud. And in the heart of the camp, Robb Stark stood beneath the stars, the weight of 1,000 lives on his shoulders, his hand resting on Grey Wind's fur. He thought of home, of winter, of a day when the banners of the wolf might fly in peace once more. He knew that day was not yet come, but he would fight for it, every step, every mile, until the river ran dry or the last of his blood was spilled on southern ground. The North remembered, and Robb would see that memory made truth. For now, he was the wolf that haunted the dreams of Lannister men, a king unbroken, a son who would not yield, a legend made flesh beneath the autumn sky. Long shadows lay across the camps of the Northmen, the gold of autumn fading into the deeper chill of approaching winter. In the hills overlooking the Gold Road, Robb Stark's host spread beneath ancient oaks and chestnuts, their fires burning low, the smell of wood smoke mingling with the musk of wet earth and trampled leaves. The men of the north and the Riverlands moved with the caution of hunters, never sleeping twice in the same glen. Their spirits battered by rain and loss, but buoyed by every tale of Lannister wagons burned and gold scattered in the ditches. Robb himself slept rarely, rising with the first hint of dawn to consult with scouts and captains, his mind forever racing ahead to the next crossing, the next opportunity, the next danger. Each morning, Grey Wind was waiting by the flap of his tent, bright-eyed and silent, as if the wolf alone understood the weight that pressed on his master's brow. Messages came daily, some in the hands of trusted riders, others pressed into the palm of a Crannogman by way of secret swamp trails. They brought word of Tywin Lannister's fury, 1,000 golden lions raking the land for the young wolf and his men, burning fields, threatening small folk, bribing turncloaks with gold and promises. They brought tales too of smaller victories, a sally from the rills that drove the Ironborn back to their longships, Lord Manderly's ships sighted off the coast of Seagard, keeping the western shore in fear. And always, there was news of the north, bitter, uncertain, filled with longing. Some said White Harbor was under siege by sea. Others whispered of a gathering at Moat Cailin, where Bolton men still prowled and sent their bloody banners snapping above the ruins. One evening as dusk crept through the camp, Robb summoned his council beneath the tangled boughs of a lightning-scarred oak. The firelight gleamed off battered mail and tired faces. Brynden Tully, hard-eyed and tight-lipped, the Great John grinning through his scars, Wendell Manderly pale but resolute. Catelyn arrived with a sheaf of letters, her eyes weary, her hands never quite still. Robb spread a map on his knees, stones at the corners to hold it against the wind. "Tywin is coming," he said, voice quiet but unyielding. "He has doubled the men on every road. We cannot linger much longer." The Great John grunted. "We've bled him. That much is clear. His gold does him little good if we burn it before it reaches King's Landing." "Down? But every day he brings more men," said Brynden, his finger tracing the roads from Casterly Rock. "If we are caught in the open, he will crush us." Wendell Manderly shifted on his stump. "Our wounded grow, your grace. The men are tired. Many have not seen their homes in 2 years." Robb nodded. "We move east. We slip the noose, cross the river, and melt into the woods north of Harrenhal. We harry his supply lines, strike where he is weakest, then vanish." He looked at his mother. "You must return to Riverrun with the wounded, and with the letters for White Harbor and the Vale. We cannot risk you in the wilds." Catelyn's jaw set, but she did not argue. "And if Tywin follows?" Robb's eyes met hers, gray and clear as the winter sky. "He will follow me. That is what I need him to do." Now, the council broke with the fall of night, each lord seeing to his own, the air thick with tension and a growing sense that time itself was running thin. Catelyn found Robb as he packed his meager belongings, her hand falling gently on his shoulder. "You carry so much, my son," she whispered. He smiled for her, a boy's smile, fleeting as summer snow. "I am the king in the north, mother. It is my place." Her eyes glistened. "Remember, you are also a son. You do not stand alone." He embraced her tightly, then watched as she mounted her palfrey, the wounded riding behind her, Maester Vyman clutching letters, the banners of House Stark and Tully dipping in silent farewell. By moonrise, the wolf pack was on the move again, east and north, slipping like smoke through the hills. The going was hard, the men silent, the night alive with the crunch of hooves and the soft clank of armor. Scouts rode ahead and behind, every sense stretched thin. Robb rode at the front, Grey Wind trotting at his side, his own mind working every angle, every possible move. Dawn found them in a mist-laced hollow, beside a willow-choked stream. A raven waited on a branch, ruffling its feathers as Robb and Brynden approached. Brynden slipped the message free, his face darkening as he read. The Lannisters have crossed the Tumblestone. A host rides for Riverrun. Robb's jaw tightened. How many? 6,000 with heavy horse. Tywin himself commands. And the garrison? Half what it was. Most rode with us. Edmure is left with the wounded, and Roslin. Robb stared at the river, water swirling around stones. He comes for me, but he'll strike at my kin first. If he takes Riverrun. Brynden's eyes narrowed. We can't reach them before the lions do. Not across country, not with tired men. Robb's thoughts raced. Then we make Tywin turn. We strike where it hurts. We take his gold, burn his stores. We make him bleed. The order was given before the dew had dried. Northmen melted into the woods, riding in small bands, scattering to harry the roads and villages behind Tywin's host. Smoke rose by midday, black and oily, as storehouses burned and terrified merchants fled. By nightfall, Lannister patrols found themselves isolated, ambushed in ravines, and cut down on muddy tracks. Still, word came that Riverrun was ringed in steel, the gold lions prowling at its walls. Catelyn's letters were scattered with the wind, her convoy forced to double back, the wounded in grave danger. Robb called his captains again, anger flashing in his voice. We draw him away. If Tywin means to break us, let him try it on our ground. The days blurred into one another. Rain fell, cold and steady. The woods rang with the cries of fighting men. Northmen struck at foragers and couriers, looted Lannister wagons, slipped away before Tywin's men could muster. In one wild night, the Great John and 24 spearmen stormed a camp and escaped with 50 horses and a chest of gold. But every fight cost men, and the pack thinned with each passing dawn. Scouts returned with grim news. Tywin would not be lured far. His army was too large, too disciplined, his captains too cautious. The siege lines at Riverrun only grew. One evening, as the wind carried the distant clangor of siege engines, Robb sat alone beneath a hawthorn, his cloak sodden. Gray wind pressed close against his knee. The air was damp and cold, filled with the ache of lost chances. He felt the weight of 100 voices, every lost bannerman, every dead friend, every cry from the north. He thought of Bran and Rickon, lost to Winterfell. Of Sansa and Arya, still caged in southern shadows. Of his mother, somewhere in the wild, hunted by lions. Brynden found him at the edge of camp. It can't be done, Robb. The Blackfish said quietly, not with what we have. Robb nodded. I know. Brynden crouched, his weathered hands clasped before him. There is another way. If we can reach the river, we might slip a handful inside, enough to bolster Edmure and buy time. Too few, Robb said, and we cannot abandon the rest. The Great John can lead the men north. I'll go with you. Robb's voice dropped. I won't leave you behind, Uncle. I won't leave any of them. A silence fell, heavy as a shroud. Brynden rose, his eyes cold. You are a king, Robb. Sometimes a king must choose who to save. Nendem Sao. Robb's hands clenched in his lap. Dot. If I abandon them, what is left of the north? He rose before dawn, calling the banners. Men gathered, weary but willing. Their faith in the Wolf King battered but not broken. The Great John stood at his right, sword slung across his back. We ride for Riverrun, Robb told them. We break the siege, or we die trying. A cheer rose, thin, ragged, but real. They set off through the mists, striking hard and fast, every man riding as if winter's breath were at his heels. Scouts found a gap in the lines by night, a stretch of riverbank left unguarded where the reeds grew thick and the mud was deep. Brynden led a handful of men ahead, vanishing into the dark. Robb followed, gray wind silent as death at his heels. They crept through reeds and water, bows and blades drawn, every heartbeat a drumbeat of fear. The river was cold and swift, the night alive with distant shouts. Robb plunged ahead, boots sucking at the mud, the taste of river water bitter on his tongue. Above, torches flared and faded, shadows flickered along the walls. Somewhere, a horn blew, and steel rang against stone. Robb's band reached the inner bank, hauling themselves up beneath the shadow of Riverrun's mighty walls. Bryndon's men slipped ahead, knives flashing in the moonlight. A sentry fell with barely a gasp. The portcullis creaked, rising inch by inch. Inside, chaos erupted. Northmen burst through the gate, Grey Wind leading the charge, his howl splitting the night. Lannister guards scattered, some dying at their posts, others fleeing into the darkness. The siege lines faltered, and the men of Riverrun poured out, axes and bows gleaming. Edmure's voice rose above the clash. For the king in the north, and the defenders rallied, driving the lions back. Robb fought at the front, his sword singing, every blow a prayer for the north. For Winterfell, for his father's memory. Dawn broke over a field of ruin. Lannister banners burned in the mud, and the river ran red. Tywin's host had withdrawn, regrouping on higher ground, but Riverrun stood unconquered, the wolf and trout banners snapping in the cold wind. Robb stood atop the ramparts, his face streaked with blood and rain, eyes haunted but unbroken. Edmure clasped his arm, tears bright in his eyes, and the men cheered, ragged, exhausted, but alive. Catelyn found him after, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clung to him. "You did it," she whispered. "You broke the siege. For now," he said. "For now." They tended the wounded, buried the dead, and prepared for the next assault. The north was not safe, and winter was still coming. But for this one dawn, the Starks endured, and the Lannisters knew fear. That night, as the fires burned low, Robb sat in the high hall, surrounded by the battered men and women who had survived. Grey Wind lay at his feet, breathing deep. The king looked out over the river, over the ruins and hopes and dreams of a battered land. The war was not won, nor lost. The North remembered, and Robb Stark, for all his wounds, for all his sorrow, endured with it. The long night was far from over, but the wolf had not yet yielded, and the tale of the young wolf was still being written. One battle, one heartbeat, one dawn at a time. Oh, cow. Beneath the battered ramparts of Riverrun, as dawn's red hand streaked the river, the battered army of the north took their measure of the night's cost. The fallen lay in neat rows along the muddy inner bailey, their bodies tended with the quiet care that spoke of long experience with death. In the tower's shadow, men wept for friends, bound wounds, whispered thanks to strange gods. All the while, the river's ceaseless song spoke of time's passage, caring nothing for men or banners, only the endless journey toward the sea. Robb Stark stood atop the highest tower, hair damp, face marked by the cut of wind and sleeplessness. Grey Wind sat at his side, alert as ever, his gaze sweeping the fields and forests for threat or hope. Below, in the distance, Tywin Lannister's host shifted like a sullen snake, banners snapping, siege lines tightening. The wolf had broken the lion's hold, but the enemy was far from routed. Catelyn joined him as the mist lifted, wrapped in a heavy cloak, her eyes hollow from too many nights without rest. She stood silently, one hand on her son's arm, as the morning blossomed over the riverlands. "Hell try again," Robb said at last. "Tywin will not leave Riverrun untaken." Her voice was a rasp. "He is stubborn, but he is not a fool. He knows the price now." Robb's lips curled. "A price paid in Lannister blood for every stone of Riverrun." She drew the cloak tighter. "And Northmen's blood, too. Your men are weary, Robb. Your enemies multiply." He nodded, eyes never leaving the distant gold banners. "And winter is not far off." Below them, the castle's yard hummed with the relentless energy of survival. Maesters walked the lines of wounded. Bryndon Tully barked orders from atop the barbican. Edmure's voice rang out above the din, urging men to reinforce the gatehouse and watch the walls. The Great John laughed over a pot of strong tea with battered bannermen. lifting spirits by the sheer force of his indomitable will. Even the youngest squires moved with grim purpose, their innocence stripped by too many nights like this. At the water's edge, ravens took flight. Catelyn watched as a black-winged shape vanished into the pale sky. I've written to White Harbor, to Deepwood Moat, to every bannerman who still holds for the wolf. Our numbers grow thin, but so do the lions. There are whispers of unrest in King's Landing. Tywin cannot be everywhere at once. Robb nodded. We hold Riverrun, and that matters. If we bleed him here, perhaps the realm will remember Tywin Lannister can be hurt. Men? A heavy silence. The realm remembers what it is taught to remember, Catelyn said softly. And kings write history in blood. A distant trumpet sounded, thin and mocking. A Lannister call, signaling another day of siege. The enemy's host shifted again, gold and crimson rippling over muddy fields. Robb's eyes narrowed. He's reinforcing the western wall. Too many riders there. Catelyn frowned. Does he mean to attack, or is it feint? Robb shook his head. We must be ready for either. He straightened. Tell the Blackfish to double the watch on the Watergate. I'll see to the eastern parapet myself. He turned from the battlements, descending into the tumult below, gray wind at his heels. As he moved through the castle, men straightened in his passing, worn, battered, but fiercely loyal. He paused at the smithy, where Gendry, the bull-shouldered bastard who'd found his way to Riverrun with a tale of flight and survival, hammered out arrowheads with single-minded intensity. My king, Gendry muttered, sweat streaking his brow. Robb nodded. The walls will need steel before this siege is done. How long can you keep this up? As long as the fire holds, and there's iron to shape. Robb clapped him on the shoulder. You'll have both, so long as Riverrun stands. He found Brynden on the ramparts, overseeing the morning patrol. The Blackfish was weathered, but unbroken, his eyes as sharp as ever. Tywin means to probe the western wall, Robb said. Brynden's mouth twisted. He'll find it less soft than he hopes. Robb leaned against the stone. We can't win a war of attrition, Uncle. Our men are outnumbered, and the larder's thin. Brynden's jaw tightened. Every day we hold is another day for the lions to tire. Another day for the river to rise. If the rains come, if the fords flood, Tywin's men will be trapped on the wrong side of the river. Robb considered that. Send men to fell trees upstream. If we can dam the river, we might force his camp to move, even catch them in the flood if they're careless. Brynden's eyes brightened. A wolf's cunning. I'll see it done. Robb's gaze drifted beyond the walls, to where lines of tents pressed against the sky. He thought of Arya, still lost somewhere in the war-ravaged world. Sansa caged in King's Landing. Bran and Rickon vanished into the cold wilds of the north. Each face was a wound he carried in his heart. Days passed in uneasy tension. The siege settled into a rhythm. Lannister assaults at the walls, probing for weakness, answered by arrows and boiling oil, then swift withdrawal. At night, fires flickered along the enemy's lines, and horns called out in the dark. Robb slept in his armor. Sword within reach, gray wind ever watchful by his bed. Catelyn moved quietly through the keep, whispering courage and caution to the men, seeing to wounded and weary alike. Edmure grew thinner each day, but his spirit never failed, his love for his home steady as the river itself. The Blackfish's men felled trees upstream, risking Lannister patrols and the swift current to build a makeshift dam. The weather turned, rain falling in bitter sheets, and the river began to swell. Robb walked the ramparts every dawn, his cloak soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, but his eyes always searching the horizon. He met often with his captains, plotting feints and sorties, ever seeking a way to break the siege without breaking his men. One night, as wind howled and rain hammered the towers, a small boat slipped through the flooded ford, guided by the nimble hands of a Crannogman. Robb and Brynden met it at the Watergate. The Crannogman handed over a sealed letter, the wax broken, its script hurried but unmistakable. From Davos Seaworth, hand to King Stannis. Robb read it by torchlight, his brow furrowing. Stannis has moved from Dragonstone. He calls banners, marches on King's Landing. Tywin's spies say the city is weaker than it seems. Food is short, gold grows scarce. Brynden grunted. If Stannis threatens King's Landing, Tywin will have to choose. Hold Riverrun or save his grandson's crown. Robb's mind spun with possibilities. If we strike while he moves, we might scatter his rear and break the siege for good. He dispatched riders by night, north to White Harbor, west to the Vale, east to the Stormlands, bidding all those still loyal to the Wolf, to harry Lannister supply lines, to set fires, to spread fear. Make him feel the North's teeth, Robb ordered. The dam broke with the third day's rain. The river rose in angry spate, trees and barrels hurtling past the Lannister camps. Tents washed away, fires drowned, siege engines toppled. In the chaos, Blackfish and his men led a sortie from the eastern gate, cutting down those who tried to flee the water, capturing wagons and prisoners. Robb led the charge at the western wall, Grey Wind a silver shadow at his side, his men crying "King in the north" as they burst through the battered palisade. The enemy broke before them, the Golden Lions mired in mud and confusion. Tywin's banners withdrew in disarray, leaving hundreds behind. By sunset, the siege was broken. The price was high, the dead many, but Riverrun stood free. Robb gathered his lords in the high hall, faces drawn but lit with new fire. We have shown the lions that the wolf does not yield, but winter is still coming. We must press our advantage. The great John grinned, holding up a battered cup. To the young wolf, may the snow bury every lion from here to Casterly Rock. Robb raised his cup, voice steady. To the north, to our dead, and to the day when no Stark need fight another war. Later, as the fires burned low and the hall emptied, Catelyn found her son standing alone before the hearth, hands clenched. You have done what no one thought possible, she whispered. He shook his head. I have done what I must. It never feels like enough. Ben Shao. She kissed his brow, as she had when he was a child. You are enough. You are my son. You are Winterfell. He closed his eyes, drawing strength from her. We march soon, he murmured. If Tywin flees to King's Landing, we'll harry him all the way. The host rested only a day. By morning, scouts returned with word that Tywin's men had broken into smaller bands. Many headed south and east, desperate to reach the safety of Lannisport or the walls of the capital. Others remained, dug in along the fords and roads, harassing villages, burning what they could not hold. Robb divided his host, sending Edmure and a small garrison to hold Riverrun, while the rest moved west. His banners flew high, the dire wolf and trout side by side, the words, "The North remembers," on every tongue. He sent letters ahead, promising protection to the small folk, justice to those who would kneel, and vengeance to those who would raise arms against him. The column moved swiftly. In each village, the old and wounded were cared for, the guilty punished, the children given bread and hope. Robb visited every camp, every fire, listening to his men, learning their fears, carrying their burdens with a quiet, steady grace. One night, in a ruined holdfast by a stream, he met with a ragged man whose accent marked him as Westerlander. The man dropped to one knee. "My lord, I fought for the lions. I have no love for Tywin, nor his gold. The folk here are yours if you'll have them." Robb lifted the man to his feet. "I will have all those who fight for their home, not for coin. Spread the word. The North does not forget loyalty, nor forgive betrayal." And Grey Wind sniffed the man, then sat at Robb's side, satisfied. As autumn deepened, word came from the south that Stannis Baratheon had taken the field, that King's Landing itself trembled. The tide of war had shifted. Robb sent ravens to every lord. The wolf would march, not as prey, but as hunter. He knew the price. Every mile meant fewer men. Every day meant another heart lost to cold and steel. Yet he pressed on, the spirit of Winterfell in his veins, the dream of a free north burning bright. He was not naive. He saw the cost in every camp, every grave, every empty gaze at dusk. But he also saw hope, fierce and hard. in the eyes of those who followed him. One morning as frost silvered the fields, Robb found Catelyn gazing east, her cloak drawn tight. She handed him a letter, her voice hushed. From White Harbor. Lord Wyman pledges his fleet, and word is that the Karstarks move again. Robb read quickly. Heart thundering. The North rides. We may yet see Winterfell again. Catelyn pressed his hand. You will. The North will have its king, its home, its peace. He smiled then. For her and for the North. For every name and face and song that lingered in his memory. I will not fail you. Nor them. She squeezed his fingers, tears shining in her eyes. As the column marched again, Robb rode at its head, gray wind silent beside him. The banners of the North unfurled in the cold wind, and the song of the river followed them west. Unbroken, undefeated, ever-flowing. The lion had been driven back, the wolf's howl echoing across the fields and forests of a battered land. And Robb Stark, the young wolf, rode onward. Not as the hunted, but as the one who would see the North's hope made real. No matter what the cost. The great host of the North snaked along the river valleys and over the wooded hills, pressing ever west beneath a sky that promised snow. Each morning the world woke colder, the grass silvered with frost, the air crisp enough to bite. The Northmen rode with furs drawn tight, their faces red and raw, eyes set on the distant horizon as though they could conjure Winterfell itself beyond the next ridge. Robb Stark was always at their head, gray wind ranging ahead, a swift-moving shadow that sent crows and foxes fleeing into the brush. Every day, fresh tidings came on the wind. Scouts galloped in from the fords and crossroads, breathless with news of Lannister bands in flight, or desperate small folk seeking the wolf's banner. Ravens brought scraps of parchment, letters from the Blackfish at Riverrun, from Wyman Manderley in the north, from the Vale and even, impossibly, from the Wall. A storm was breaking across Westeros. King Stannis battered the walls of King's Landing, and the lion's tail was firmly between its legs. Yet with every message, Robb felt the weight of the realm on his shoulders grow heavier. By noon on the third day's march from Riverrun, the host paused at a ruined sept beside the tumbling Red Fort. It was a tumble-down place, long since abandoned, its stones picked clean by time and war. Robb dismounted beneath the ragged shadow of a broken arch, accepting bread and salt from an old woman who still remembered the old gods and the new. "You're Eddard Stark's boy," she said, peering up at him with filmy eyes. "And there's no safer hands for the Riverlands. My sons fell for King Robert, but you remind me of him. Of honor." Then, Robb bowed his head. Embarrassed. Grateful. He pressed a coin into her hand and bid her stay close to the camp until the host moved on. He could not protect every life, but he would not see this one left to the mercy of the roving lions. Catelyn found him at the edge of the camp, hunched beside a smoky cookfire, turning over a letter from Deepwood Mott. She sat, drawing her cloak tight, hands wrapped about her knees. The lines on her face seemed deeper than ever. "Lord Manderley writes of White Harbor's harbor frozen with northern ice," she said. "But his heart is warm. The Karstarks have bent the knee again. We are mending, Robb. The North comes together." He nodded, glancing west toward the forest. "We have to win them more than hope, Mother. We have to give them peace. Every mile we ride, another village is burned. Another child turned orphan." Then, she reached out, tucking a stray curl behind his ear. "You cannot mend the world in a season. You can only do as your father did. One day, one justice, one kindness at a time." A horn's plaintive cry cut through the camp, thin as a wolf's howl. Men scrambled to arms, but it was only the return of the Great John and his foraging party. Riding hard with news. "They're scattered, your grace," he bellowed, sliding off his horse, "but not gone. Lannister riders raid in bands of 50 or 100, burning as they flee. They'll leave the whole countryside smoking if we don't run them to ground." Robb studied the map stretched across the saddle. "They'll keep heading west, toward Lannisport or the Golden Tooth. Send riders to every village with orders. The Northmen come as protectors, not conquerors." Any man who fights for his home is our ally, so long as he does not wear the lion's red and gold. Then Dinawand. The great John thumped his chest. The wolf protects the realm, eh? We'll see the lions know it. The host moved west at speed, skirting battle where they could, striking swift and sure when the enemy was caught. Bands of Lannister men, leaderless, hungry, desperate, fell before the Northmen's axes or fled into the hills to vanish. In each village they passed, Robb's captains posted new proclamations. Peace to the peaceful, justice to the betrayers, bread and shelter to all who needed it. Old knights and graybeard peasants alike pledged loyalty, drawn by the promise of a king who bled for more than a crown. Each night, as camp was struck, Robb rode the perimeter with gray wind at his side. He listened to the men. What they missed, what they feared, what they dreamed. He heard tales of home, of dead brothers and sweethearts left behind, of hopes for the spring and the rebuilding of the world. His presence heartened them, and when he left each circle of fire, voices rose in song. The North remembers, and for Winterfell. Catelyn watched all with a quiet pride. She sat by the cook fires, mending and soothing, her words oil on troubled waters. To the youngest squires she was a mother, to the old soldiers, a reminder of everything that might still be saved. News from the wider realm was sobering. Tywin Lannister had withdrawn much of his host south toward the capital, leaving garrisons only at the Golden Tooth and in the craggy passes. Word was that Lord Tywin sought to reach King's Landing before Stannis could breach its gates, leaving the Westerlands leaderless, the gold roads dangerous but open. At a riverside ford where the current ran swift and the trees clung to their last gold, Robb called his council. Around him gathered the great John, Wendell Manderly, Brynden Tully, Maester Vyman, and several captains of the reformed Westerlander levy. A rough map was spread across a tree stump, weighted by stones. "The time is now," Robb told them. "We do not chase the lions to their den. We let them go. Instead, we secure the passes, protect the small folk, and rebuild what the Lannisters have burned. Every lord who swears to the direwolf will be treated as a bannerman of the North, so long as he holds to peace." Wendell nodded, mouth set in a hard line. "If we march on Casterly Rock, we lose ourselves in their trap. But if we make the land ours by oath and deed, we build something lasting." Brynden added, "If Tywin flees, the gold will follow. That is victory enough." The council agreed, and for the first time in many moons, Robb sensed a subtle lifting of the war's shadow. The snows came early that year, dusting the high ground in white, and forcing the Northmen to huddle close at night. Still, they worked. 1,000 men repairing roads, digging new wells, raising up what could be saved from the Lannister wreckage. Robb rode to every corner of the reclaimed land, meeting with old lords and new, granting justice, pardoning where he could, punishing when he must. In the shattered holdfast of a lesser Lannister cousin, Robb sat in judgment on a stormy night. The hall was cold, the roof patched with hides, the air thick with smoke and fear. The accused, a thin, red-haired man with clever hands, had been caught looting a neighbor's flock. Robb listened to the tale, then to the pleas of the village, and finally to the confession. "You fought for the lions, and when they left, you stole to survive. Yet your neighbors vouch for your courage at the ford. You will return the sheep and serve the village in penance for the winter. If you break faith again, the next justice will be final." The man dropped to his knees, tears tracking the dirt on his face. Robb offered him a hand, and the villagers murmured their thanks. Outside, snow fell softly. Catelyn watched her son through the window, the set of his jaw, the care in his voice. "You are your father's son," she whispered. The host pressed north, leaving garrisons at the key passes, bringing every loyal lord to swear fealty at Robb's hand. Word spread from the rivers to the sea. The Wolf King brought not only war, but peace. Winter towns opened their gates, and old songs returned to the firelight. One bitter evening, as the moon rode full, and the fields shone silver, a messenger came from Deepwood Motte, bringing news that the Ironborn had finally withdrawn, driven back by Manderly ships and the might of the mountain clans. White Harbor sent grain. Bear Island warriors arrived with oaths and wolf pelts, and the flayed banners of the Boltons were nowhere to be seen. With the land secure, Robb sent letters to the Wall and the Vale, proposing a council of peace in the spring, a gathering of North, Riverlands, mountains, and all who wished to see a realm rebuilt, not with gold but with honor. As the longest night approached, the host made camp near a ruined sept. The snow drifted thick about their tents, but fires burned high, and the mood was one of weary hope. Robb sat beside the flames. Gray wind curled at his feet, Catelyn knitting quietly at his side. "Winter will be hard," she said, voice soft. "But it will end." Robb nodded, gaze distant, dreaming of Winterfell. "And when it does, the North will be ready. Not for more war, but for the world our fathers meant for us." She reached for his hand, warmth and strength in her touch. "And you, Robb, what will you do when there is no more battle to fight?" He smiled, a flicker of boyhood breaking through. "I will go home. I will see the God's wood again, and hear the wind through the pines. I will mend what was broken. That is all I have ever wanted." The wind moaned in the eaves. A wolf song, a promise, a prayer. And in the morning, as the camp broke and the banners rose, Robb Stark rode at the head of his host, his people behind him, the direwolf's howl ringing through the snowbound woods. The North was battered, scarred, but unbroken. And the king who led them was both winter's child and its hope. A son of Eddard, a dreamer of peace. A legend still in the making beneath the ancient watchful sky. In the deepening cold of early winter, the wolf banners traveled north, leaving the riverlands and burned fields of the westerlands behind. The snows thickened daily, whitening the hills and muting the woods. But the men marched all the same, boots creaking, horses blowing steam, armor layered with frost. Robb Stark led from the fore, his head bare to the cold when the sun shone, his breath a white plume as he scouted ahead with gray wind for company. When he looked back, the column of Northmen and Riverlanders stretched for miles, a living river flowing through a frozen land. At each hamlet or holdfast, the king stopped to see the folk. Some villages greeted the host with wary relief, others with weary resignation. Robb always insisted his men treat these small folk with respect. No stolen grain, no rough words, no burning of outbuildings for firewood. When a crone offered him a cup of hot ale, he accepted with thanks, warming his hands as much as his spirit. "You're your father's boy," she said, much as so many others had. "May the old gods keep you." Sometimes there were tears, or laughter, or tales of the days before war, and Robb found himself wishing, fiercely, for a simpler life, a life beyond battlefields and banners. In these cold days, the war felt like something distant, a tale carried on the wind rather than a living thing. But at night, in the flicker of campfires, Robb's lords and captains gathered to speak of what came next. Wendell Manderly, his wounds mostly healed, brought news from the coast. The Ironborn harried the White Knife, but the Manderly ships pushed them off. "Lord Wyman asks when you'll come to White Harbor, Your Grace. He wants you to see his city, and there's talk of rebuilding the Wolf's Den." Bow. Brynden Tully, ever the Blackfish, was all vigilance. Bolton men are scattered but not gone. Roose himself vanished, his bastard not seen since the rout by the marshes. "I don't like what I don't see, Robb." The Greyjohn wanted to ride straight for Winterfell. "There's not a man here who doesn't long for home." "Give the word, Your Grace, and we'll retake our seat in a day." Robb listened to them all, his face grave in the firelight, Catelyn nearby, her gaze steady on her son. "We'll go home soon," Robb told them. "But not yet, not until the North is safe, and our bannermen are gathered. The land is wounded. If we move too soon, alone, we might lose all we've gained." Catelyn nodded. "You're wise to wait. Letters from the Wall say the Night's Watch faces hardship. Their food runs low. Wildlings gather in the Frostfangs. The world is changing, Robb. It's not only the South that threatens us." "Menduan Shao." Robb met her eyes. "The cold winds are rising. The North must stand together or fall." After a week's march, the host approached Moat Cailin, that ancient ruin of black stone. half sunken in the bog and snow. The causeway was treacherous, ice coating every flagstone. Scouts found Karstark men and a banner of the Umbers watching from the ramparts, and when the Northmen approached, the gates swung open, axes raised in welcome rather than defiance. Inside, the old godswood was bleak and bare, the heart tree shivering under rime. Robb held council there beneath the boughs, with the North's lords assembled. Manderly, Karstark, Glover, Reed, Umber, and even old Lord Serwyn, bent with age but sharp-eyed. The Blackfish stood for the Riverlands, and behind Robb, his mother's silent blessing hung in the icy air. "We hold the neck," Robb declared, his voice carrying through the stones. "The lions are fled, the Ironborn driven back. The Boltons are scattered, but our wounds run deep. Winterfell is in ruins, and the Crofters suffer. We must mend, or all we've won will be for nothing." Rickard Karstark, older now, his face furrowed, nodded gravely. "We have lost much, but the North remembers, and the North stands with its king." Lord Manderly thumped his chest. "White Harbor is yours, Robb Stark. Our ships, our swords, our grain." Howland Reed, slim and still as water, said only, "You have our fealty, and the neck will be closed to your enemies. None shall pass without your leave." One by one the other lords spoke the same. When it was done, Robb asked the Greatjon to bring forth the banners. Wolf, bear, merman, and more, and all knelt in the snow before the young king. Robb raised his sword and swore, "By winter's cold and the old gods' witness, the North will never kneel to the lion or the kraken. Not while one Stark draws breath." Cheers rang among the stones, and for a moment it seemed all the broken world might be remade, right there in the frozen ruin of the old stronghold. The host wintered in the neck. Tents went up among the standing stones and half-fallen towers. Grain from White Harbor was brought by sled and wain, while the men repaired dikes and cleared the causeway of ice and mud. Dice. The Manderleys taught the Karstarks and Glovers how to salt and smoke fish, and the Reeds led hunting parties into the marsh for frogs and game birds. Catelyn established a makeshift hospital in the largest tower, tending wounds and frostbite, comforting the homesick and grieving. Children who had lost fathers in the war gathered at her skirts, finding warmth and solace in her patient hands. Robb used the quiet months well. He called each lord to private council, learning their hopes and wounds, seeking to bind them tighter to the wolf banner. He wrote letters, sometimes a dozen a day, sending word of peace and protection to every village, asking for news, inviting the small folk to send envoys to the king's fire. The tales of his kindness spread, and refugees began to arrive. Crofters from the Barrow Lands, woodsmen from the tall pine hills, even a handful of hill clans from the mountains near Winterfell. Each was welcomed, clothed, fed. One bitter morning, as the snow piled high on the causeway, a rider came from the south. A Stark courier, nearly frozen, with tidings from the wall. Catelyn brought him to the king's tent, her eyes worried. Robb broke the wax with numb fingers, reading in silence as his mother and bannermen watched. The letter was short and grave. "The dead walk again, Robb. We are beset. The old powers stir. Send what aid you can, for the wall may not stand another winter." Brynden cursed. "God save us. The others." Wendell Manderly paled. "The wall was our shield. If it falls..." Robb's face hardened. "We will not stand idle. If the wall calls, the North answers." He turned to the Blackfish. "Gather men, volunteers only. We ride north as soon as the river ice will bear." He looked at his lords. "Send grain, wool, arms. We do not fight Lannisters now, but death itself. This is why we must stand together." Then Dorandur. Through that long, hard winter, Robb prepared. The North's old alliances revived. The broken lords were given land to hold and seed to plant. Messages went south, to the Vale, to Riverrun, even to the Stormlands. The North would not forget the debts of war, nor the duties of peace. In the evenings, the king sat with his mother by the fire. Gray wind sprawled at their feet. They talked of lost years, of old stories, of the world they hoped to build. Catelyn's hair grew whiter by the day, but her hands were still strong, her voice steady. On the coldest night of the year, as the wind howled and the campfire sputtered, Robb walked alone to the godswood. He knelt in the snow beneath the heart tree, eyes closed, hands pressed to the cold roots. "Father," he whispered, "if you see me, know I am trying. For Winterfell. For the North. For all of us. Da." When he rose, the world was silent, except for the wind and the slow beating of his heart. He looked back to the camp, where men laughed and sang despite the hunger, where Catelyn waited, where the banners of his house stirred in the cold air. Spring came slowly, the snow melting from the neck in sodden drifts, the river breaking its ice and rushing north in a torrent. The Northmen stirred like bears from their dens, the camps coming alive with hope and the restless urge to move. The first green shoots appeared along the old causeway. Birds returned, their songs piercing the silence of months. When the first riders came from the wall, black brothers gaunt and hollow-eyed, Robb met them in the heart of Moat Cailin. They brought word of a battle fought in shadow and snow, of the others repelled for now, but the wildlings pressing south, of the wall cracked and failing. "We need men." "A young Sir Elizar, and grain, and hope. You will have all three," Robb promised. "The North remembers its vows." In those brightening days, Robb called his host together once more. The banners were faded but proud. The lords were tired but unbowed. And as the king rode north, leading his men toward Winterfell and the wall beyond, the land rang with the sound of steel and hope. The promise of a new peace, a realm rebuilt, a world defended by those who remembered honor and kin. Catelyn rode with him, her heart full of pride and sorrow, her eyes always fixed on the boy she'd raised and the man he'd become. And everywhere they passed, the people came forth to cheer, to press their hands to the wolf banner, to pray for the king who was both winter's fury and its hope. So the North marched on, beneath the vast and ancient sky, toward a fate neither man nor God could foresee. And Robb Stark, son of Winterfell, carried his people's future in his heart, leading them onward, ever onward, through the last snows of winter and into whatever spring might come. Okay. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 9440 dB on DB 372 at beyond. A pale green mist rose over the neck as spring crept northward, slow as hope, reluctant as healing. By day, the marshes steamed, alive with frog song and the flash of darting fish. By night, fog crawled among the half-flooded ruins, and the campfires of the Northmen gleamed like fox eyes in the darkness. Robb Stark watched it all from the high stones of Moat Cailin, the ancient stronghold now, a patchwork of new timber and old moss-laden stone. Each day he walked the ramparts with gray wind at his side, listening to the land and its people, weighing every word, every silence. The North's banners clustered thick around the walls. Wolf, bear, merman, sunburst, and more. What had once been a king's army was now more. A people united not only by grief and vengeance, but by hunger and rebuilding, by the slow, stubborn work of peace. The war was not truly over. Beyond the neck, the world still boiled with troubles. The Lannisters clung to King's Landing, the Boltons lurked in northern forests, and the wall sent ravens bearing warnings of worse than men. Yet here, for the first time in years, Robb sensed something fragile but real. A beginning. Lord Manderley's wagons arrived, heavy with flour and salted meat. From White Harbor, fishermen brought barrels of herring and casks of ale, their laughter echoing over the flooded fields. The Karstarks and Umbers rebuilt palisades and cleared the old roads, bringing order to the causeway. Glover and Reed men scouted the swamps for enemy movement, but found only wild pigs and silent cairns. Each day the sick healed, the weak grew stronger, and the old tales returned, sung by fires, told to wide-eyed children who dreamed of wolves and giants and winter's end. Catelyn Stark kept her own vigil in the main tower. where light from narrow windows fell on ledgers and maps, and the faces of men and women who'd survived the storm. She met with healers, widows, orphaned boys, sent to learn arms, old men whose lives were measured in wars. She listened. She remembered. She wrote. She sent messages to every corner of the North, calling for unity, for mercy, for the simple acts that might rebuild trust. By her hand, land was parceled to the rootless, tools distributed to those willing to work. To the new mothers she sent baskets of grain and hope. To those who had lost everything, she gave the one thing that still mattered: a place in the world. Robb saw the change each day. The anger of his men eased, replaced by something like pride. The talk at meals turned to plans for planting, to matches for sons and daughters, to the fate of distant kin. The old wounds of betrayal, Freys, Boltons, even Lannisters, no longer bled so freely. Justice had been served, vengeance taken. What mattered now was the future. It was not all peace. News came daily, trouble as constant as the tides. The Ironborn raided the coast, burning lonely crofts, and snatching what they could before vanishing. In the shadows of the Dreadfort, rumors whispered of Roose Bolton gathering broken men. His bastard leading knight rides through the frost-bitten woods, and from the wall, every raven's wing bore the chill of another world. Wildlings massed beyond the ice, dead things stirring in the haunted forest. The time is not yet come, Jon Snow wrote. But it draws closer, Robb. Winter has not ended. It sleeps, dreaming of teeth and hunger. Robb called his council together in the main hall, firelight flickering across battered shields and tired faces. Wendell Manderly spoke first, booming out the numbers of wagons and grain. Enough for the summer planting, your grace, if the men hold their oaths and the sea stays kind. Howland Reed, thin and still, reported on the marshes. No man or lion crosses the neck without leave. If Bolton moves, we will know. The old gods have eyes everywhere in the green lands. Men in our wind. The great Jon thumped his fist. Let the Krakens come. We'll break their ships and feed them to the marsh wolves. And if Bolton or Lannister dares show their banners, we'll hang their hides from the walls. Rickard Karstark, gray and distant, nodded but said little. The pain of his lost sons still haunted him, but loyalty bound him to Robb's will. Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, raised the greatest threat. The wall is the key. The realm looks south, but the true danger is north. Jon's last raven spoke of giants, shadows, and wildling hosts massing on the ice. The Night's Watch stands, but they are few. If the others break through, the whole wall may drown in wind. Robb listened to every voice, feeling the weight of every word. We must hold the neck and the passes. We send grain and men to the wall, as we can spare. If the wildlings cross or the dead walk, we must be ready. The North has always been the first shield, and the last hope. Then so. Catelyn's eyes were red, but her voice was steel. And what of Winterfell? At that, the hall stilled. Every man and woman there felt the ache of that name, the ruin of their heart, the promise of their future. Robb rose. We march home, not in force, but as a people. The lords will go first to ready their keeps. The small folk will follow, with guards for every wagon. When the snow is gone, we will plant again at Winterfell. We will rebuild. For every lost son and daughter. For every wolf that ever howled, we will make Winterfell hope. So began the long journey north. The banners broke from Moat Cailin and streamed across the causeway. Karstark's leading the first column, followed by Manderly's, Glovers, Reeds, Umbers, Serwins, and the rest. Robb and Catelyn rode near the front, the Blackfish at their side. Grey Wind ranged ahead, his presence enough to send Ironborn scouts fleeing and convince bands of would-be reavers to melt into the trees. The closer they came to Winterfell, the more ruined the land. Farmsteads burned and blackened, orchards chopped for firewood, fields gone to weed. Robb halted at every home, seeing for himself the price his people had paid. When he found survivors, old men wrapped in rags, women stubborn and silent, a few children hiding in cellars, He gave what aid he could, set his own men to the work of repair, and left behind food, tools, and the promise of protection. A week from Winterfell, the first real snowstorm caught them on the open road. The sky turned gray as iron, the wind howled, and the world vanished in white. The host drew close, tents clustered together, fires burning night and day. Robb worked as hard as any, helping drag wagons free, hauling firewood, keeping spirits high with quiet words and stories of old. That night, as the blizzard roared, Robb found his mother beside the fire, reading a letter by smoky lamplight. She smiled as he sat, exhaustion and hope mingling in her face. "Ravens from the wall again," she said. "Jon is alive. He writes of a great host gathering beyond the ice, but for now, the wall holds." Robb stared into the flames, his thoughts racing. "It may not hold forever," Catelyn nodded, brushing his cheek as she had when he was a boy. "But it holds now, and we are almost home." The storm passed, leaving a world gleaming and sharp. On the last morning, Robb climbed a rise above the road and saw Winterfell at last. Blackened walls rising from the snow, the towers ruined, but the old godswood still standing proud within. The sight brought a lump to his throat. He remembered running the walls as a child, the sound of Bran's laughter, the scent of pine and smoke and summer rain. The gates were open, a handful of loyal men-at-arms standing guard. The direwolf banners went up on the walls, and a shout rose, a ragged cheer, but a real one. The North had come home. Robb led the way through the broken gates, gray wind at his side, Catelyn and the Blackfish behind. The courtyards were full of drifts and debris, but everywhere he saw new life. Men clearing rubble, women scrubbing flagstones, children peering from behind pillars with wide eyes. The air smelled of smoke and pine, and somewhere a wolf howled. A true wolf, not a dire wolf. A sign of the wild north healing at last. Robb dismounted before the great hall, his heart full. He looked to his mother, to Brynden, to his bannermen, to the tired, hopeful faces all around. "This is only the beginning," he said, his voice low, fierce and clear. "Winterfell will rise again, stone by stone, and with it, the North. Not for war, not for vengeance, but for the world we lost, and the one we will make." That spring the North set to work. Stones were raised, walls patched, gardens dug and seeded. The godswood echoed with prayers, the great hall with songs and laughter. Every house sent aid, grain from White Harbor, sheep from the hills, strong arms from Bear Island. In the ruined towers, new banners hung, and from every gate flew the direwolf. Robb held court beneath the heart tree, hearing the grievances of lords and small folk alike. He dispensed justice as his father had, firm, measured, without favor. Each day brought more work, but also more hope. The wounds of war did not heal quickly, but every act of mending was a blow against the darkness. News from beyond the wall was watched with dread. Wildlings massed in the haunted forest, and the others were seen in the long night's shadows. Yet every time fear rose, Robb answered with courage. He sent food, weapons, and men to the wall. "The North is not broken," he told his people. "And we will not abandon our brothers, whatever comes." The first summer flowers opened in the godswood. Children played in the courtyards. Old men wept to see the flagstones clear again. Catelyn stood on the walls each evening, looking west and north, her heart full. The Blackfish organized the rebuilding of the walls. The Manderleys managed the stores. The Reeds and Umbers patrolled the wilds. All the while, Robb worked as a king and as a son, a brother, a friend. When night fell, he walked the silent halls with gray wind, remembering every name lost, every promise yet unkept. And in the quiet of dusk, with the last light gilding Winterfell's walls, Robb would look out over his home and know, deep in his bones, that the North was alive. Its heart beat stronger than ever, guarded by the memory of all it had endured. And whatever storms might come, whether from the south, the sea, or the ice beyond the wall, The wolf would stand, unbroken, unbowed, a legend made real beneath the watchful eyes of gods and men.